Well, good morning, my dear students. Today, on behalf of the Department of Surgery, we are going to take a lecture on the topic of surgery. And today, I will go in a different way. This is we call a problem-based learning. What it means, initially, I will discuss a problem or case scenario, and after that, with the reference of this case scenario, we will go to the discussion. So let us start first. Here is a case report. I'm requesting you to listen very carefully and we notice the important points here. Here is a case report. A 50 years female patient presented with occasional parodactyl bleeding for last 1 year. Initially, the patient used to pass blood at an interval of 15 to 20 days and persist for 2 to 3 days each time. The bleeding occurs only during defecation, but for the last 1 month, the patient is passing small amount of blood each time she defecates. The patient presents a lump in the left flank for the last 8 months. The lump is about 4 centimeters in size at the onset and it's gradually increasing in size. The patient complains of alteration of the bowel habit for the last 6 months in the form of constipation followed by diarrhea. She has some relief of pain after defecation. She also complained of anorexia and weight loss for the last 6 months. She had no history or other symptoms. So this is the case scenario. On physical examination, there is mild pallor, the patient is pale, all vitals are within normal limit. And on abdominal examination, the counter of the abdomen is normal, abdomen is moving normally with respiration, no visible peristalsis was seen, but there is a lump in the left iliac fossa. Notice it, there is a lump in the left iliac fossa extending left lumbar region. The lump is intra-abdominal. Again, notice the point here, the lump is intra-abdominal, globular in shape, 10 to 8 centimeter in size, surface is smooth, consistency firm, no mobility with respiration, liver, spleen and kidneys are not palpable, no free fluid in the peritoneal cavity. And on auscultation, bowel sound is normal, diarrhea is normal except the finger is stained with blood. As the patient is a female one, the parvaginal examination is normal. Other systemic examinations are normal. So this is the case scenario, the history and the physical examination findings. Now you think what may be the diagnosis of this patient. So the patient is presenting with the lump in the abdomen, the left side of the abdomen, left lower quadrant of the abdomen with few symptoms. So you have to correlate the findings and the history. So naturally, if the patient is presented with a lump in the lower side of the abdomen, left iliac fossa or left lumbar region, so we have to think what are the anatomical structure present in this area. So you have to think rationally what are the anatomical structure present and what is the source of the lump. That is at what tissue plan the lump is arising. And you have to correlate this lump with the history of the patient, how the patient present. So if you think this, that there are several things you will come to your mind. What may be the causes of this lump in this 50 years lady with the history of alteration of the bowel habit, parodactyl bleeding, anorexia, weight loss, bowel. It's not very difficult one. So let us see what is the diagnosis. The most probable diagnosis here is the carcinoma of the descending colon, isn't it? So if you consider the history, if you consider the physical findings, you will find you come to a conclusion the most probable cause of the lump in this patient or the diagnosis of this patient is the carcinoma of the descending colon. The next thing is we think always what are the other possibilities, that is the differential diagnosis. Let's think what are the points in favor of this diagnosis. What points actually tell us to come to this diagnosis, that is the points in favor. First of all, there is elderly patients. This is one of the important points. Number two, the patient is having alteration of the bowel habit in the form of diarrhea and constipation. The patient had history of parodactyl fresh bleeding. Patient had history of mucus with the stool. And on examination, the patient is anemic and In abdominal examination, there is a lump in the left side of the abdomen. And on digital rectal examination, the finger is bloody stain. So all the points are in favor of this carcinoma of the descending colon. Next thing, what are the other possibilities? That is the differential diagnosis. Uh, uh, these are the differential diagnoses. It may be a chronic tuberculosis, though it's very rare. It may be a chronic Crohn's disease, again it's rare. It may arise from the retroperitoneal tissues, that is the retroperitoneal tumor. It may be abdominal lymphoma as well as, and it may be other causes of the renal swelling. As for example, it may be renal cell carcinoma, it may be TCC, that is transitional carcinoma, or it may be hydronephrosis as well as. So all these things, if you are thinking it's a long case in the examination, you have to write down the differential diagnosis in this form. These are the possibilities. It may be chronic tuberculosis, it may be chronic Crohn's disease, it may be retroperitoneal tumor, it may be lymphoma, that is abdominal lymphoma, or it may be any cause of renal swelling, either renal cell carcinoma, transitional cell carcinoma, or hydronephrosis. Now the next question is, what investigations you will do to confirm your diagnosis? So the investigation needed for confirmation of the diagnosis is the colonoscopy and biopsy. Okay, so the investigations needed to confirm the diagnosis is the colonoscopy and biopsy. The why full length colonoscopy? Because the whole colon is to be examined, and you have to look for the synchronous lesions and associated polyps, etc. So this is an important term I discussed in my last lecture. There's two terms, and synchronous and metaconus. So if at the same time there is two primary tumors, then we call it synchronous. And if after operation the patient develops primary tumor, that is called the metaconus. So in these patients, a full length colonoscopy and biopsy should be done for the confirmation of the diagnosis. Now the next question is how you will stage the tumor. That is the extent of the tumor. To assess the extent of the tumor, we call the stage. For staging of this tumor, you have to do a few investigations. First of all, you have to do a ultrasonograph of the whole abdomen to see the liver metastasis, to see the peritoneal seedling. You have to do a X-ray chest to see pulmonary metastasis. And most important thing, you have to do a contrast enhanced CT scan or an MRI. So this is the main thing. You have to do a CT, contrast CT or an MRI to exactly to do the see the extent of the tumor, how far or how much the tumor has been spreaded or extended. Now another important thing, that the tumor marker we call it carcinoembryogenic antigen, CEA. You have to know something about this carcinoembryogenic antigens. What is it, and what is its clinical implementation of, and how and where it is used. So basically, it is a glycoprotein present in the embryonic tissue and colorectal cancers and in normal colonic cells. So it is a chemically, it is a glycoprotein. It is carried on the cell membrane and normally shed within the stool. So it is a physiological thing. In cancer, it is shaded into the serum and serous fluids. The serum level detected in 65% of all the colorectal cancers. So you will find increased level of carcinoembryonic antigen in about 65% of the colorectal cancers, and which depends on the tumor stage. So 30% in due to stage A and 90% with the liver metastasis. If the patient is having a liver mets, in 90% cases you will find the increased level of the carcinoembryonic antigen. And in the early stages, say for example, the patient is having a Duke stage A, then in 30% cases, you will find there is increased level of the carcinoembryonic antigen. It depends on the site of the tumor as well as low in the right side lesions, but higher in the left colonic lesions. There is a very important thing. The level of CEA is more in left colonic lesions in comparative study to the right side. It will depend on the degree of differentiation. That is, more the tumor is undifferentiated, there is more chances of the increased level of the carcinoembryonic antigen. It will depend on the functional hepatic status. So it will again depend on the how the liver is function. So preoperative carcinoembryogenic antigen estimation is important as a baseline study. So in all the patients, we do a carcinoembryonic antigen level for baseline study. If this carcinoembryonic antigen becomes normal after surgery, if there is no metastasis. So it is very important point. If after surgery, if this CA level, say for example, it was high level before the surgery, and after surgery, if it is close to the normal, and then we can think that there is no metastasis, either local or liver, and a raising level suggests recurrence. So after doing a surgery, if you find patient there is increased level of this persistently increased level of the carcinoma embryonic antigen, then you must be very suspicious. There is a chances of the recurrence. Then you will urgently you do some investigation to see the body actually where there is the level of the recurrence is. So it is not a specific uh, investigation or serum marker because other than colonic carcinoma, in other conditions, this carcinoma embryonic antigen may be increased. It's very important. It's a commonly question in the asked in the examination. What are the conditions where you will find increased level of the carcinoma embryonic antigen? So you have to tell, sir, you will find increased level of CE in case of carcinoma stomach, in case of carcinoma of the pancreas, in case of carcinoma of the breast, in case of carcinoma of the lung, that is bronchogenic carcinoma, and there are some non-malignant conditions where you may find there is increased level of the carcinoma embryonic antigen. Among these, there are cirrhosis of the liver, you will find the renal failure, you will find increased level of carcinoma embryonic antigen in ulcerative colitis, and it is increased normally in case of chronic smokers. So this is a very important things in the Viva examination. Usually we asked what are the conditions where you will find increased level of the CE. So better you mention this, or you will find the level of increase will be in colorectal carcinoma, all forms of colorectal carcinoma, and carcinoma of the stomach, carcinoma of the pancreas, carcinoma of the breast, and bronchogenic carcinoma. And we will find increased level of carcinoma in some non-malignant conditions like cirrhosis of the liver, in renal failure, in ulcerative colitis, and also in smokers. So regarding management of this patient, the common questions will be asked here. What are the other investigations you would like to do for managing this patient, the carcinoma of the descending colon? So you will have to tell, sir, you will do a total blood count. Here the important thing is the hemoglobin percentage of hematocrit value is very important. You will have to check the blood sugar of this patient, urea and creatinine. You have to do a blood grouping of this patient. You will have to do a ECG of this patient. You have to do an X-ray test, serum electrolytes, and serum albumin. So these are the most important investigations you must do to assess the patient. So I'm repeating the thing that you have to do a total blood count, blood sugar, blood urea and creatinine level. You'll have to do a blood grouping. You'll have to do an ECG, do an CXR, that is X-ray chest, serum electrolyte, and serum albumin. And this serum albumin is especially important here because if the patient needed a resection anastomosis in any form, then this albumin level is very crucial. Because if the patient is hypoalbuminic, there is chances of the failure of the anastomosis. So this thing is very important. We have to correct the serum albumin level before going to an operation. Now the question is commonly asked in the exam: how you will treat this patient? So what is your plan? How you will treat this patient? So the answer is, say, I will do an exploratory laparotomy after proper preparation. And if operable, I'll go for left hemicolectomy. This is the standard answer. So what you'll do, you'll prepare the patient. After proper preparation means what the deficit you have found. If the patient is anemic, correct the anemia. If the patient is diabetic, one, control the diabetes. If the patient is having hypoalbuminemia, you correct the albumin level. So after adequate preparation, so you the main thing is that you will have to prepare the patient adequately. So after adequate preparation, you will plan for a exploratory laparotomy, and this is an important term. What we call the exploratory laparotomy. The term exploratory laparotomy means the patient had an indication for doing a laparotomy, but after entering into the abdomen, the procedure will depend upon the condition of the patient. So this is called exploratory laparotomy. That means you have to do a laparotomy, and the procedure you will do, it will depend on the condition of the patients and the condition of the disease and extent of the disease. And the common formula is, if operable, I will go for left hemicolectomy. And there is two terms. One is operability and another is resectability. It's very important in terms of surgical procedures. the tumor is operable and tumor is resectable. So you have to have a clear idea what by the term these two what we actually mean. Say for example, operability. In general, the operability relates to the patient general condition. Say for example, patient is in shock or patient is in advanced stage of the of, um, carcinoma. Patient is having a huge ascites. Patient have a recent MI, uncontrolled diabetes. So in this case, patient is not operable. That is operability. Okay, so usually operability relates to the clinical condition of the patients. The very moribund patient, ASA stage 4 or 3. So these are the conditions that patient is not operable. And by resectability, what we mean, actually the condition of the tumor. Say for example, a tumor is attached to the vascular vessels. A tumor is attached to the ureter. A tumor is attached to the duodenum. A tumor is fixed to the posterior retroperitoneal wall, then it is not resectable, because in these cases, if you want to resect the tumor, then you will injure the ureter, you will injure the duodenum, so your operation will not be successful. So the answer here is I will do an exploratory laparotomy after proper preparation of the patient, and if operable, I will go for a left hemicolectomy if your diagnosis is a carcinoma of the left colon. So I think it is clear what is operability and what is resectability of the tumor, particularly in terms of malignancy. And now the questions, how you will prepare these patients. Very important question in the examination, how you will prepare these patients. So we will prepare the patient by correction of the anemia by giving packed cell volume. That's very important, because in anemic patient, usually the whole blood is not given. Because if you give a whole blood to anemic patient, it will cause fluid overload, and there is a chances of ventricular, especially the right heart failure. So always in anemic patient, don't give whole blood. Always our idea is to give the packed cell, because we want to not increase the volume of the patient. Rather, we are interested for increasing the RBC of the patient. So you will transfuse packed cell volume as per grouping of the patients. Another important preparation in case of left colonic surgery is the GARD preparation. So it is very important to prepare the GARD. So here is the idea. There are so many thoughts how there is so many ideas. There are so many ways you can prepare the GARD. Here is a simple one. What we do, we allow the liquid diet for 24 hours before the surgery. For 24 hours before the surgery, the patient will allow liquid diet only, and you can do GARD irrigation with polyethylene glycol. So it's a chemical solution. By this, you can do a GARD irrigation. A sachet of 100 grams are dissolved in 2 liters of water on the previous evening. So, and the patient will be asked to take this liquid, that is 100 grams of polyethylene glycol dissolved in 2 liters of water on previous evening. And antibiotic. Then again, a very important thing in the GARD surgery or colonic surgery, we always follow the protocol of antibiotic prophylaxis. That is administration of the antibiotic before the infection has occurred. So it is a common thing in colonic surgery. And what operation we'll do here? I stated earlier, or I told earlier, that we will want to do a left hemicolectomy. What is mean? The left 1/3 of the transverse colon, whole of the descending colon, proximal half of the sigmoid colon with transverse mesocolon, sigmoid mesocolon, and the associated limb. So these things have to be excised in this left hemicolectomy. So this is the picture you see. It is the level of excision. One third of the transverse colon is splenic plexus, whole of the descending colon, and proximal part of the sigmoid colon, along with these vessels, this mesocolon, and all the lymph nodes and fats present here. So this portion you will surgically excise. If you excise this portion surgically, and will make an anastomosis. That is the transverse colon with the upper part of the lower part of the sigmoid colon, or the upper part of the rectum. So this is a left hemicolectomy operation. Now the important issue is the margin clearance. There is a term commonly used in uh, malignant, that is surgery of the malignant diseases, that is especially the tumorous conditions. What is the ideal margin clearance? At least 5 centimeters. So you have to clear 5 centimeter proximally and 5 centimeter distally from the tumor margin. However, 2 centimeter is adequate if mesentery is resected with cut. Wider margins are recommended for poorly differentiated and anaplastic cuts. So ideal standard is the 5 centimeter, but 2 centimeter is enough sometimes. And wider margin is recommended for poorly differentiated. As the tumor is poorly differentiated and anaplastic, then a wider margin is recommended. But standard is the 5 centimeter. You must do clear the 5 centimeter above the tumor and 5 centimeter below the tumor, along with the tumor and the lymphovascular territory. There is another two term, that is total or subtotal colectomy. When it is done, multiple coronary cancer are associated with the neoplastic polyps. Say, for example, a patient is having a synchronous tumor, one in the sigmoid colon and another in the ascending colon. In that case, you will have to do a total or subtotal colectomy. Or if the patient has having a cancerous or neoplastic polyp in the other part of the colon. So that is the indication of doing a full length colonoscopy. If you diagnose, though you diagnose is the carcinoma of the left colon, but we want to evaluate the whole colon, because after doing the colonoscopy, your treatment policy may be changed. If you find a neoplastic polyp or a synchronous lesion otherwise, then a left hemicolectomy is not enough. In that case, you will have to go for total or subtotal colectomy. So another important point, how will assess the operability or resectability. Here actually the term means the resectability. How you will determine after laparotomy whether the tumor is resectable or not. Number one point, liver. If you will examine the liver, if there is multiple secondary in the liver, that is, it is not resectable. Number one. Number two, if the patient is having a disseminated peritoneal seedling in the form of ascites or omental deposit. After laparotomy, if you see the patient is having a widespread peritoneal seedling, the patient is having an ascites, patient is having a omental deposit, this again is not resectable. Lymph node enlargement, again, if you found there is a fixed lymph node, it is inoperable, or it is, and most important thing is the local fixation of the tumor. This is really very important factor if you want to consider the way that tumor is resectable or not. Local fixation of the tumor is very important. Say, for example, a tumor is fixed to the ureter, that is that it encroaches the whole of the ureter. That is a very, if the tumor is involving the inferior vena cava or left iliac veins, if the tumor is fixed to the retroperitoneal wall. So in this case, you cannot resect the tumor, because if you want to resect the tumor, so you will definitely do the injury to the ureter or a nerve or a vessel or a blood vessel, etc. So this is very important. So after laparotomy, you have to assess these important things. So commonly in the exam, we asked how will assess the operability or resectability of the tumor. You do a laparotomy, you adequately, before that, it adequately prepare the patient, and you correct the all conditions, and anesthesia has been given, and you do a maiden incision, and after incision, what are the things you will have to look for. So you will have to look for the liver, you will have to the peritoneal seedlings, the lymph nodes, and especially you'll have to look for the local fixation of the tumor, whether the tumor is fixed or not. Here is another important things in the surgical technique, Turnbull's no-touch technique. It's very important things in case of malignant patients, because whenever you handle the malignant tumor, there is a chances of the dissemination through the blood vessels, especially the veins. So what is the approach? In this approach, the early division of the blood vessels before the tumor is handled. So if you are decided you will go for some form of resection in the form of left hemicolectomy, then this technique, if you follow this technique, that the early division of the blood vessel, that the blood vessel should be cut, that is, should be tied before you go for handle the tumor. Because if you handle the tumor, there is a chances of the dissemination of the tumor cell through the venous blood, especially. So this is a special technique, we call it the Turnbull's no-touch technique. Don't touch the tumor before devascularization. That is, first of all, you secure the blood vessels, tie the blood vessels, and then you handle the tumor. So another important things here is that there are some principles in colonic surgery. In all colonic surgery, whether it's the right sided or the left sided, so there are some accepted rules, that you have principles that you have to follow. So what are the rules? Let us discuss. Sigmoidoscopy and biopsy are key investigation in both emergency and elective cases. So either sigmoidoscopy or in colonoscopy and biopsy. So these things you have to do first before doing any colonic surgery. So confirmation of the diagnosis either in the form of sigmoidoscopy and colonoscopy and biopsy. Bowel preparation should be perfect. This is very, very important because in the bowel there are millions of bacteria and fecal matters. So bowel preparation is a very important issue in case of colonic surgery. Don't operate without antibiotic cover. That is, antibiotic prophylaxis is very important in case of colonic surgery. Especially we uses third or fourth generation cephalosporin along with metronidazole. So that is the principle, and that is the antibiotic that commonly used in case of heart surgery. Full mobilization is essential, especially splenic flexor, so that segments are tension free. That is a very, very important, especially in case of left hemicolectomy, the full mobilization of the splenic flexors. The splenic flexor actually is attached to the spleen. Hilum of the spleen, there the splenic flexor is attached. So a full mobilization is very essential because if you don't mobilize the splenic flexor adequately, the anastomosis that you will do, there will be tension. So there is a basic principle, all the anastomosis should be tension free. So to do a tension free anastomosis, a full mobilization of the splenic flexor is essential. Early vascular interruption to prevent the intravascular dissemination. As I stated earlier, Turnbull's technique. So early vascular interruption is another principle in colonic surgery. Always identify the ureter in left colonic surgery. That is again a principle. So in case of left colonic surgery, you have to check or you have to see the ureter. What is the location of the ureter and what is the position of the ureter and what is the involvement of the ureter in the tumor. In both, that is preoperative intravenous urogram is an essential to see the course of the ureter. So that another important point. Actually, we want to see the position of the ureter, particularly in respect to the colonic tumors, either on the right side or on the left side. So before doing the planning the operation, to see the courses of the ureter, we must do an intravenous urogram. Another rule is irrigation of the stump. That is, the remaining the stump that will be remain should be irrigated by 1% noxethiolin. So this is a chemical that is tumoricidal. So this is a principle to irrigate the stump. It is done especially in case of anterior resection. The anastomosis should be, this is very important, the anastomosis should be gas tight. That is airtight. It should be non-strangulating with no tensions. Very, very important thing is that it should be gas tight, that is airtight. It should be non-strangulating. So you cannot do an anastomosis in a very, very tight way. That is doing a strangulation of the tissue. So it should be tension free with no tension. As I stated, if you mobilize the splenic flexor, then the remaining part of the transverse colon and the upper part of the rectum or sigmoid colon can be anastomosis without tension. So you should not allow any tension. Should be covered with living tissue such as omentum. So it is a common practice after doing a anastomosis. We usually cover the tissue with omentum. Omentum acts as a barrier. Drainage is a must in presacral spaces. It's very, very important because after operation there is a chances of development of the presacral hematoma. So to prevent this, we must drain the presacral area. Regarding the colostomy, colostomy does not influence the leak, but it is a life-saving when leak occurs. It's a very important thing. By far, the colostomy does not influence the leak because leak is anastomotic leak is depend on the technique. What technique you are uh, applying or by what technique you are doing the anastomosis. But colostomy has a life-saving when leak occurs. If there is a anastomosis leaking, then if the patient had an colostomy, then it is a life-saving. A primary colostomy is indicated in presence of interperitoneal sepsis or when a very low anastomosis is done. So if you're doing an emergency operation with interperitoneal sepsis, patient is having a peritonitis or something like that, or a very low anastomosis where there is no peritoneal covering, a primary colostomy is always indicated, either in the form of colostomy or in the form of that is an stoma or in the form of an ileostomy. Postoperative digital dilatation is recommended to decompress the intracolonic pressure. It was previous theory, after doing an colonic anastomosis, the digital dilatation of the anal sphincters was done to decompress the intracranial pressure. Though it is the theory is obsolete nowadays, it's not done routinely nowadays, but some surgeons are doing. Then next the question is, if the tumor is not resectable, what you will do? Say for example, after doing a laparotomy, you see the tumor is not resectable. Then what are the options? And you have to do a transverse colostomy, isn't it? After doing a laparotomy, see the tumor is attached to the posterior abdominal wall, it is involved in the ureter, so there is peritoneal seedling, there is omental metastasis. Then what we'll do? Then the option in our hand is that you have to do a transverse colostomy. Another important question: so what are the functional effects after hemicolectomy? If you do a hemicolectomy, what functional effects happen to the patients? It's not very no major functional effect is there, but there may be several small stool per day, but volume is not increased. So the frequency of the stools may be increased, but volume is not increased. So this is a normal happening after doing a hemicolectomy. And how to do the hepatic metastasis? Say for example, this patient is having hepatic metastasis. What will do if there is a single metastasis? You can resect the metastasis along with the primary tumor. So, for example, you are doing a left hemicolectomy and the patient is having a single hepatic metastasis. Then the recommended is you have to resect the metastasis along with the primary surgery. Multiple mets in one lobe, you can do a segmental resection or lobectomy. The patient is having a multiple metastasis in one lobe, you can go for segmental resection or lobectomy. And multiple lesion widespread throughout the liver, these are the candidate for chemotherapy, cryotherapy, or laser therapy. So if the patient is having widespread lesion in the both lobe of the liver, then the options are you go for the chemotherapy, you can go for the cryosurgery, that is another technique, you can go for the laser therapy as well. Now, regarding the adjuvant therapy. What I mean by adjuvant therapy? That is the therapy that is given after the operation is called the adjuvant. And if it is administered before the operation, then we call it the neoadjuvant therapy. So regarding the adjuvant therapy, the normal standard protocol in Duke stage 1, no adjuvant therapy is needed or having any benefit. In stage 2, it is controversial, may be given or may not be given. But definitely in stage 3, the adjuvant therapy has got a role. So in stage 3, what adjuvant therapy is given? It's given 5-fluorouracil plus leucovorin. 5-FU plus leucovorin plus oxaliplatin has a clear benefit in stage 3, and it is given for the 6 months. So actually this is a very important message. In stage 1, if you operate, no need of any adjuvant therapy. And in stage 2, there is a controversial, it may or may not be given. But in stage 3, definitely you have to give a adjuvant chemotherapy as a combination adjuvant chemotherapy by 5-fluorouracil, leucorobocin, and oxaliplatin. So this is recommended for the 6 months. So these things you have to remember. So what is the treatment, that is the adjuvant treatment plan for carcinoma of the colon after operation? That is the new adjuvant therapy. And in very advanced stages, stage 4, if primary tumor is resectable, do it for better. So if the tumor is a resectable one, if resectable, then some form of excision is better. And in isolated hepatic metastasis, resection is indicated. Single liver metastasis, resection, and 5-fluorouracil based chemotherapy, and now it is a monoclonal antibodies. These are the immunotherapy. These are one form of immunotherapy. Now the important thing is the follow-up. How you do a follow-up of this patient after operation. So there is an important thing is that there is a 70% chances of recurrence within 20 years. So that is the very important things. So after operation, there is a 70% chances of recurrence within 2 years and 90% within 4 years. So early detection and treatment can improve this prognosis. As we know, within 4 years there will be 90% recurrence chance, and within 2 years there is 70% chances of recurrence. So early detection and treatment can improve the prognosis. So what is the protocol? 2 years every 3 months, and 3 years every 6 months follow up, then yearly. So this is the recommended protocol how you will follow up the patients after surgery. 2 years every 3 months. So every 3 months you have to follow up the patient for 2 years, and next 3 years every 6 months, and then yearly. So that is the recommended follow up of the patient. How you will do the follow up? So this is the protocol. When the patient will come, you will do a thorough clinical examination. You will do the liver function test. You will do the carcinoma antigen. You will do the X-ray chest. You have to do yearly CT scan for the 3 years, and yearly colonoscopy for up to 5 years. So this is the standard recommended protocol of follow-up of a patient who had a left hemicolectomy. So you will have to do a clinical examination. You will do the liver function test. You will have to do the carcinoma antigen. You will have to do X-ray chest, and yearly CT scan for 3 years, and yearly colonoscopy for up to 5 years. So when the patient will come to you for follow-up, you will have to do all the procedure you have to maintain. So now the macroscopic types I discussed in the earlier lecture. There are 4 types. One is annular, another is tubular, another is ulcerative, and another is cauliflower. So these two are the stenoging type. That is, if the patient is having annular one or tubular one, the patient will present with intestinal obstruction. And these ulcerative and cauliflower type, these are presented with the insidious onset. You have to remember here that these ulcerative and cauliflower are more common in the right side of the colon, and these annular and tubular are more common in the left side of the colon, as they are presenting an intestinal obstruction. So the patient is having an annular or tubular variety will produce early symptoms, and symptoms like of the intestinal obstruction, and they will present it earlier. And these two, ulcerative and cauliflower, they will produce the insidious onset. There is no obstructive feature. The patient will be detected, or patient will be reported to the surgeon or doctor a very later stage in compared to the annular and tubular one. What the histopathological type? Commonly it is an adenocarcinoma, but it may undergo colloid degeneration. Cell filled with mucin appearance of signet ring. So that is the histological criteria. It will be adenocarcinoma with signet ring appearance. So what are the etiological factors for developing carcinoma of the colon? Adenocarcinomatous polyp, that is familial polyposis coli, APC gene. There is a genetic factor. There is 2 things: the APC gene and HNPC, hereditary HNPCC. There are dietary factors. That is commonly it is postulated that fat-rich diet is responsible for developing of the carcinoma of the colon. What is the pathology? Because if we know the fat reduces the transit time of the colon. So if the transit time is decreased, then the food materials or residue is staying in the colon for the long time, and there occurs bacterial degradation and production of the chemicals that are usually carcinogenic. That's why the dietary factor, the rich in fat, that is fatty diet, increases the chances of the coronary carcinoma. Ulcerative colitis, these are the ulcerative colitis that increase in 1% per year. If the patient is having a ulcerative colitis, the risk of malignancy is there. Crohn's disease is not proven. The Crohn's disease may cause malignancy, but in long-standing cases, there Crohn's disease may turn into the malignant one, especially the colonic Crohn's. That is another important thing is how you will manage a patient with obstruction of the left coronary carcinoma. Sometimes, as I stated, the annular and tubular varieties are common in the left side. The patient of the left coronary carcinoma may present as acute intestinal obstruction. And that is the acute, typical clinical picture of the acute intestinal obstruction. So if a patient of coronary carcinoma, that is left-sided coronary carcinoma, came with intestinal obstruction, so there are different approaches. You have to understand what are the things. you can do the surgery in 3 stages. You can do the surgery in three stage, 2 stage, or single stage. So commonly, these you have to know the options. What are the options here? Say for example, in 3 stages, what is do? You do a laparotomy and colostomy at first stage. So in the first stage, that the patient is in intestinal obstruction, patient is having an electrode imbalance, not fit for anesthesia, having some renal function deterioration. So to relieve the obstruction, you do a laparotomy and do a colostomy. Let the patient survive first. If you do a colostomy, a laparotomy and colostomy, the patient will hopefully the patient will be survive. And second stage, you will do the resection of the tumor. After that, if you try to normalize the condition of the patients, correction of the anemia, correction of the electrolytes, correction of the albumins, correction of the liver functions, etc., then you do the resection of the tumor. The second stage, you do the resection of the tumor, and third stage, you closure of the colostrum. So this is this is the standard procedure. So if a patient with colonic carcinoma presented to you with intestinal obstruction, so what are the possibilities? If you go for 3 stage planning, then first of all, you'll do a laparotomy and do a colostomy. And second stage, you do the resection of the tumor. And third stage, you do the closure of the colostomy. And another option, that is the second stage procedure, what we do, initially you do a laparotomy and do a Hartmann operation. So initially you do a Hartmann operation, and then you do in with second stage, you do the reversal of the Hartmann operation. What is a Hartmann procedure or Hartmann operation? All you know, after laparotomy, you excise the tumor, and the proximal end you do a colostomy, and distal portion of the gut you make a stump and close it. So what is done here? You have excise the tumor. So you excise the tumor, you do the a colostomy. Otherwise, you are relieving the obstruction. So the major problem of the patient, that is the obstruction, is relieved, and the tumor bulk of the patient, that is the you are not leaving the tumor inside the abdomen no more. So we are removing the excising the tumor. So excision of the tumor and a colostomy is called an Hartmann procedure. And when the condition of the patient will be normal, you will correct the deficiencies, the correction of the anemia, you correction of the electrolytes, improvement of the liver functions, improvement of the albumin. When the patient is physically normal, then we go for the reversal of the Hartmann. So this is a two-stage procedure, and another is a single stage. So all these things you can be done the single stage. Say for example, you will do a laparotomy and do a left hemicolectomy with a primary anastomosis. The problem is that if the patient is not, the patient is in septic stage, patient is in electrolyte imbalance, patient is in hyponatremia, patient is in hypoalbuminemia, this anastomosis might not be safe. And at the same time, as there is obstruction, there is a disparity of the lumen between the proximal and distal one. And it's very difficult to do a primary anastomosis. And there is a more chances of the anastomosis failing. So these things should be single stage, should be done by the experienced surgeons only. But for a trainee surgeon or a less confident surgeon, either 3 stage or 2 stage is the better for this patient. So here you see the picture of the Hartmann procedure. That is, you see here, this is the cecum, appendix, ascending colon, transverse colon, and descending colon. And here is the site of the colostomy. And the remaining portion, there was a growth, and the remaining portion has been excised with the tumor clear margin. And this is the distal stump. A distal stump is kept, and stitches has been given in the distal stitches. So after doing a Hartmann procedure, the intestinal obstruction is overcome, and the tumor burden of the patient, that has been also overcome. And when the patient will be normal one, you do the correction of the things, and then with the next procedure is the reversal of the Hartmann operation. You detach this portion from here, and you do a anastomosis with the stump. So there is the reversal of the Hartmann. Technically, it is very difficult, but it can be done. So, recapitulating the Duke staging. Stage A, the tumor limited to the bowel. Stage B, the transmural invasion. Stage C, any degree of bowel with C1, that is epicolic and paracolic lymph node involvement, and C2 means intermediate and proximal lymph node. So the Duke staging. There are another staging system, Ashlar colors modifications. Details you need not to be know the details of this, and you know the TNM classification as well as there is T1, T2, T3, T4, N0, N1, N2. It's very simple. T1 means submucosa, T2 means muscularis propria, T3 means subserosa, and T4 means adjacent organ. N0 means no metastasis, N1 means 1 to 3 lymph nodes, N2 means 4 or more lymph nodes, N3 means involvement of the central lymph nodes. And it's very simple regarding the metastasis. M0 is no metastasis and M1 is distance metastasis. Now, in short, what are the factors, that is the prognostic factors on which the uh, mm, recovery or of the patient depends. Number one is the clinical presentation, whether the patient is presented with obstruction or not. It's very important. If patient is presented with obstruction, then prognosis is bad. If the patient is presented before obstruction, prognosis is relatively better. Another important issue is the age and sex of the patient. It's very important. First presenting symptoms is very important. That is the clinical presentation, whether the patient is presented with obstruction or not. And again, the duration of the symptom prior to the surgery is very important, because we know the 6 months is required to involve the one quarter of the length lumen of the colon. So duration of the symptoms is very important, because if the patient is presented with 2 years before, after the symptom, that is a different from the patient who presented 6 months after the development of the symptoms. And again, the prognosis depend on the operative findings. Site more distal, poor prognosis. It's very important. So the site is, the more distal the site, prognosis is poor. Palpable lymph nodes close to the bowel wall is poor prognosis. And again, fixity of the tumor. If the tumor is fixed, definitely the prognosis is poor. Complication during surgery is again a important factors. If the, say for example, during surgery there is sudden blood loss, the patient will go in shock. So in shock there will be loss of, there is a problem in the microcirculation, and we know this microcirculation is essential for the anastomosis. If you do anastomosis, if the microcirculation is not working, your anastomosis will definitely fail. So this is a very important issue. If the patient goes to shock during surgery, these are the bad patients. Tumor spillage. Again, I discussed the Turnbull's no-touch technique. Before handling the tumor, you should revascularize the area. So you should tie the especially veins and arteries. So tumor pillage is a very important factor. And in other gut surgeries techniques, say for example, in case of carcinoma of the rectum, if you do a total mesorectal excision, it's very good. If you don't do a TME, prognosis is not that much good. But if you do a that is AR or anterior APR with TME, total mesorectal excision, the prognosis is good. And of course, it will depend on the surgical approaches, whether it is a curative or palliative. If it is a curative one, that is en bloc resection of the tumor, then with lymph nodes, all blood vessel fats, so that is good. And if you do a palliative excision or simple colostomy, though this is not a very good one. The prognosis will depend on staging, definitely. The staging in stage 1 and 2 is better, and stage 3 and 4 is bad. Lymphatic metastasis, and again the number and fixity of the lymph nodes. So it will depend the how many number of the lymph nodes are involved and whether the lymph nodes are fixed or not. Extramural venous invasion, that is another important point. So if the tumor is having extramural venous invasion, treatment is prognosis is bad. And all tumors, and the histological differentiation is very important. You know, if the tumor is well differentiated, the prognosis is good. If the tumor is anaplastic or poorly differentiated, the prognosis is very bad. And of course, distance metastasis, if the patient having a pulmonary metastasis or bony metastasis, or patient is having a liver metastasis, so treatment, that is prognosis is very bad. Large intestinal obstruction, perforation, or tumor spilling during the operation. That what I mean here, if the patient present with intestinal obstruction or perforation or tumor spilling during operation, so these are the bad prognostic factors. The prognosis will not be very good. Another important thing is the anastomotic leak. If after operation the patient is having anastomotic leak, the prognosis is definitely bad. Preoperative blood transfusion. So there is an important issue in colonic surgery. There are so many journals, so many studies. They say if you give a preoperative blood transfusion, the prognosis is bad. The exact mechanism is not actually described, but it is an observation, it is the findings. So actually perioperative blood transfusion is not indicated in colonic surgery. You can give intraoperative or postoperative. That is very important. Level of the CA level. If the CA level is initially high, prognosis is bad. If the CA level is low, other factors including mucin production, always the mucin production producing tumor, that is the signatric appearance, the histological appearance is a very poor candidate. That is a bad. DNA study, tumor-associated antigen and oncoprotein, mutated P3, these are having a worse prognosis. So thank you very much. Thank you for careful listening. My message is here. This lecture is not enough. You have to go through the books. You have to go through the pictures. You go to the operative surgery. Then you can understand. And this is a glimpse only. So far we have discussed. Thank you very much. See you again.